Good evening. The date is February 13th, 2024. It is approximately 7:32, and I would like to call the school board budget work session for the Frederick County School Board to order. We have an agenda before us. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented. When it's been properly seconded, is there any discussion? Okay, if no discussion, all those in favor of approving the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have an agenda. Okay, we're unfinished business. I will now pass this over to Dr. Hummer, please.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Before I get started, I want to give a big thank you to the school board for all of your hard work, dedication, and time to put into this. I know that this season is very busy. For our 4 new members, I think you got thrown into the fire pan or fire to the fire pan, whatever that statement is. I'm sure I messed that up.
No doubt.
But I appreciate all of right? But I appreciate all of the hard work that you all are doing and putting into this. Secondly, I want to mention is this is something new we started this year. So for our returning members, if you recall, we typically take this budget process through the Finance Committee. And after conversations that I've had with you and previous members, we wanted to spend a little bit more time together so that we can talk through these items, make sure that everybody feels like they're being heard and everybody is well informed in regards to the items that go into this budget. So we started off back in January, if you recall, through a budget work session of just providing you all with where we are with the budget, what's going into the budget. Now we're going to have this budget work session where we are going to provide you with a very quick snippet. We've seen it numerous times. I actually just did a presentation for our town hall, but this is just going to be a quick summary of our budget, and then the majority of this time I want us to talk through the items that you would like to see either continue to move forward with, removed, added, what have you. We'll have the discussion here so that we know what to put together for February 20th, where you all will adopt the budget, which will then go downtown. We also are going to have another budget work session after downtown approves the appropriation of dollars. So again, we can talk through all the items that were adopted and if we need to make those adjustments. So again, hopefully you all feel the same way. I appreciate this time and this opportunity together because it allows us to have a lot more conversation and so that we're all well informed with what we are adopting, or excuse me, what you all are adopting and approving. So with that, we are going to start off by, my team's going to go through again the budget presentation and going to just provide you a very quick summary of that. If there are questions or items, please feel free to do that. It is the work session, as we mentioned, but the majority of the conversation we want to go at the latter half of this meeting where we're going to discuss the recommended changes that you all would like to see so that we can work them into the budget presentation for February 20th. Okay? So with that, Mr. Chair, I'm going to hand it off to Mrs. Camry, and we will go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hummer. Mr. Chair and members of the board, so we will go through this a little quickly, only because you've probably heard it and you're like, I'm beating a dead horse. But I feel like it's important for us to at least go through it kind of quickly. If you want to slow me down and say, I have a question, I'll be more than happy to stop. Otherwise, I'm going to just keep going.
Slow down.
Okay, there we go. I'll do that. So first of all, here we are today. What we've been trying to achieve is getting to that February 20th date in which you will approve the school board approved budget. So that's our targeted date that we've had from the very beginning to get you there, to show you what's in the operating budget for the superintendent, so then you can make sound decisions of what you want to see in your budget. So with that, we're going to go through the salary initiative. Here you can see that the scale average for our 4 groups is teachers a 6.6, classified a 6.6% as well, other professionals at 5, and administrative supervisors and coordinators at 3.2. So let's break them down. So for teachers, you see COLA, we've talked about that earlier, the cost of living adjustment that also security recipients are getting January 1. So that is an inflationary percentage. So in order to keep people whole, the superintendents come out with a minimum of a COLA for all employees. So for teachers, you see the step movement at 2.3 plus that 0.9% enhancement gives them the 3.2. But on top of that, we want to do an unclustering at year 15, and we want to start the salary scale at $52,000 to be competitive at the very beginning. That all comes together for a 6.6% increase, and the cost of that is $6.8 million. For classified, the same thing. You see the COLA up there at the top, a little over $1 million. And then we want to add an enhancement on top of that of 3.4 to get them also at a 6.6% increase. The cost of that is 2.1. Other professionals, again, the COLA at the top, you'll see of $189,000. And then we want to uncluster the diagnosticians, the therapists, and the psychologists at year 15, like we are for the teachers. That's $104, giving them a 5% division average, and that cost is $294,799. Administrators, supervisors, and coordinators, he has come forward with the COLA at 3.2%, and the cost of that is $546,600. Now, on top of that, he's also looking for additional pay for our teachers, where we want to give every teacher with 25 years or above experience a $5,000 initiative on top of their salary of the 6.6 you heard about. That's a $1.4 million price tag. You see here that we're showing you what that scale would look like for those teachers that would apply to. This is a multi-year initiative. Dr. Hummer would like to do 20 years next year and then 15 the next. So it's a 3-year initiative he's looking at. Hard to fill positions, we've listed some of those. Now that could change depending on the year, but we'd like to do a hard to fill sign-on type of bonus of $2,000 each. The cost of that is $336,000. Our substitutes that we value very highly, but we're also competing with Winchester City for those substitutes. We'd like to increase both of those rates by $20. The cost of that's $250,000. So we'd like to go up to $130 for degreed and $115 for non-degreed. We'd also like to increase the bus driver bonus because our best drivers behind the wheel are normal bus drivers, right? So we want to increase that to get them up to $130 a month for perfect attendance because it is hard to find substitute bus drivers. We also gave you some data at the bottom that shows you how effective that perfect attendance bonus is. The state, Governor Youngkin came out with a 1% bonus, one-time 1% bonus for the upcoming year, FY25. You can see here the breakdown of what the state's going to give us for that 1% bonus and what local dollars would cost us. In total, it's almost $1.4 million. Positions, you can see there in the FTE, the chart there, the middle chart, part of the chart, the column there, you can see how meetings were happening to help determine what positions can be reallocated within the division. So we're not always asking for new positions. So when you take that into account, what was left and remaining was a net of 25 new positions, and you can see there where they would be allocated. Special ed, we have 1 compliance that we have to do, and ELL, we have 6 to be compliant. That cost us $2.1 million. Dow J. Howard, you heard of our night school to serve approximately 50 students at Dow J. Howard for a small price tag of $46,800, so we can open that up to fit the needs of some of our students. And we also have a new budget. We have a new department, really, of safety and security, so this is to kind of help get that budget started. He needs a lot more money than that, but this is a starting point. So we'd like to put another $100,000 in that budget for some intruder locks or some cameras for exterior. Our bus replacement, we have 2 that we'd like to add at a cost of $260,000. We currently have 6 recurring in the operating fund. This would add 2 more, so we have 8 recurring in the operating fund so that our transportation department can continue to know that every year they're at least getting 8. We'd like to get that number up to 13, and we're trying to do that year over year. But this would give them 8 if these 2 get approved. CEP, again, this is for because the percentage of those that qualify here has risen or decreased down to 25%. But let me just say very clearly here, this is not, even though all students can participate if it were free, we know based on historical data and projections that only 60% of our students participate when lunches and breakfast are free. That comes at a cost of $2.2. Here you'll see the revenue side, the number in red of a little under 8 million. That's the number we're asking from the county for new money in the operating fund to support what you just heard. Our debt service is a separate fund, so we'll talk about that and just switch over. So you can see here, next year, to service our debt, we'll need approximately 2.35 million more to service the debt. That's principal and interest. The reason it's peaking in FY25, you see on the bar graph, is because of the borrowings for Indian Hollow and Jameswood High School. But you'll see in FY26, it starts going down and continues to go down if there's no more new debt. Our capital projects fund, so I'll switch to the third fund that we'll talk about. You can see here that we have a lot of outstanding capital projects we need to address. If you look in the far corner there, or the far column, I'm sorry, you'll see what year they went on this list. So some are from 2024, some are 25, and some are new for next year. So if we don't address capital projects, they continue to increase, they don't go away. So at this point in time, our capital project, yeah, bless you, goes up to $19.8 million. These are one-time funds that the Board of Supervisors look at and allocate one time. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Dr. Hummer.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Camry. I think you'll have to present this budget next year for me. What do you think? In January. Great job. So with that being said, essentially, we want to have an open conversation. We want to entertain those questions from you all about what we would like to see added, removed, increased, decreased, so that we have a good idea of what to present to you all on February 20th at the next board meeting. What I'm initially thinking is we're going to open up, Mr. Chair, for conversation from the board, and we can discuss those items that you all would like to see, like I said, adjusted or changed. And then based on the number of items that you all would like to see changed, we can either move forward with some of those adjustments that you all have a consensus. Again, this is a work session, so you can't, there's no action or motion during this meeting. But if we could then put together a rendition of that and provide it to you all on February 20th, or if there are numerous renditions, then what we can do is we can put together like an option A, option B, option C, and then you all can vote on that on February 20th. Again, will of the board, however you want to do that. As I mentioned earlier, I think this is definitely a good step in the right direction for us because we can have these open conversations before the board meeting on February 20th. I also want to draw our attention is we have two new members here that have come and joined us for Mr. Conlon and Mr. Shepard. Thank you so much for being here. So if there are any additional questions about the safety and security piece or transportation, of course, we also have Mrs. Curry here who did her presentation last night. So if there are additional questions, please let us know. We're more than happy to answer those. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would like to send it over to you to open up for open conversation. Thank you, sir.
Are there any comments from the board members?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Atkins?
when we look at the safety and security budget, we talked about this a little bit in building and grounds. I kind of touched on some of the things that we want to get done. I'm just kind of curious about that, the $100,000 price tag for recurring budget. In my mind, once we buy cameras are there, they have a shelf life, and I understand they'll need to be replaced or updated or whatever as the school years progress in the future. What else would this $100,000 go to? What's your, I guess, Mr. Conlon, what's your vision on, how, I'm guessing you had some input on this.
Great question, Mr. Atkins.
So overall, we're looking at door readers for every door in every school. Right now, most schools only have one. The average cost of the door readers per school is around $136,000 to $150,000, depending on the size of the school and the number of the doors. We're looking at changing over from fob access to key card access. We're looking at the shelf life of a camera can be approximately 5 years. So every 5 years, you have to have that factored in. Same thing with servers. Servers go out. The contract or the contracts for the servers or the warranties for the servers, those are large expenses. So we're looking at stuff like that. Ballistic film on the fronts of our schools, it's got a 10-year shelf life. It's very expensive. It's not this, the budget that we're asking for does not provide for anything new. The budget that we're looking at did not even have our weapons detection system figured into it. It's just for the existing things that we have right now.
I understand, and that's kind of where I'm looking at it. It's just kind of scratching the surface, really, and it's not going to provide the updates that we're looking for. I mean, I don't really know what you'll be able to do with $100,000, or yeah, $100,000.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Mr. Atkins, we agree that this is something that it's a starting point. We'll be able to address the items that we mentioned here. There's additional things that we need to do. This was a starting point for us. As I mentioned to you all in regards to how the needs-based budget is put together, if Mr. Conlon had his way, this would be significantly higher.
Bet.
Right? And Mr. Conlon, if I may kind of brag on him a little bit, he has done an outstanding job. He's gone school to school. He's worked with our principals. He's worked with Mr. Goodwin. He's working with our sheriff's office to keep our students and our staff safe. And there are multiple things that he has addressed that we need to fix. This was a starting point. There are going to be grants and opportunities that he's going to be taking a look at, but again, that's only going to touch the surface. So if that is the will of the board to increase for that, you will have no objections here. This was just a starting point for us because this is also, this is the first time we've had this department.
And I understand,
So, yeah.
like, we're definitely going to have, you know, a learning curve on this, you know, on where to allocate funds and everything. And I don't want to go hog wild on it. And I understand, yeah, $1 million budget is probably what you want, and everybody else does. Good story. I hope you find $20 at the end. But, you know, I'm kind of looking at that, and I do think that's a little bit low. My question is, that $100,000, it's given to you today. What are you doing with it today?
I would attempt to do the reader doors at one of the schools. It would get us probably 3/4 of the way through one of our schools.
So with that, like you said, it's not going to, it'd be about $130,000 to do all the readers at all the schools. Would it be more beneficial to take that and do maybe the exterior doors first and on multiple schools and then work it to the interiors as the years progress?
So that is exterior doors. That's not counting any interior doors.
Okay.
So we did win a grant. It was $300,000. We're doing NREP with that grant, and we'll also be buying key cards for access to the schools. But aside from that, we're doing intruder locks on our schools so that with push buttons like that on the crash bars, they'll have a push button lock just like your bedroom door, so that we don't have to worry about if teachers are under stress, they don't have to turn the key. Same thing for the classroom doors. It'll be a push button and a turn, no more keys, that we won't have to worry about teachers not being able to get the key in to lock the classroom
Under
doors.
stressful situations, you lose your fine motor skills, and
That's right.
you definitely can't be fumbling through your pockets for keys and which key is this. So I appreciate that we're looking at stuff like that. I'm just kind of trying to figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to spread that out without getting into putting it out as far as anything that would make our schools subject to giving out more of our security information as to your plans, you know, kind of keep that as closely guarded as we can.
So just 1,000 classroom door locks is over $300,000.
Well, that's a lot. So yeah, I'm just thinking that once again that we're just scratching the surface with 100,000. I would like to maybe suggest to the board that we find some money elsewhere and maybe increase that a little bit. I would like to see that increase to maybe $150,000, because if 130 can get you through one school, maybe that other 20 can help out with something else somewhere else. Just be using it wisely.
And, Mr. Chair, if I may. Mr. Atkins, it's my, and Ms. Camry, please back me up on this as well. It's my understanding this is just to get you guys started, since this is a new, you're brand new
Correct.
to the budget this year, right? So more to follow is the impression that I received during one of our finance committee meetings.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could add just a little bit, I don't know if this is on. Okay. Is also what Mr. Conlon also is dealing with is he's also having to work with facilities who may have some money for him and IT who may have some money, because this is a new department, so it's kind of trying to separate and give him some of that money as well. So we're still trying to work through some of those details as well.
Okay, excellent.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Conlon, for answering questions, and we're very thankful to have you on our team with your expertise. I'm sure it's not very easy to find. You mentioned ballistic for windows. Did you mean bulletproof?
So that term is kind of a false term. So there's a big difference between bulletproof glass and bulletproof film. Bulletproof film doesn't exist. Ballistic film exists. And essentially what that means is the bullet will go through the film, but only the bullet. It's based on a time that the higher the quality of ballistic film, the longer it takes for someone to get through that and into a building. So for a demonstration, you might see somebody will come and shoot up the window. Well, it's got a lot of holes in it, but it's still intact and they can't get in. So what it does is it buys time for law enforcement to get on scene. And I think most of them are rated somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes.
Do we have any of those in the
We do.
division?
We do.
Okay. Oh, it's kind of dismaying that we're at this point for our children, that our children have to live in an environment in which we're putting ballistic film on the windows. It's
Well, just something to remember for all our board members is we're trying to be proactive. We haven't seen any real threats. We just want to be ahead of this because, God forbid, we don't want to see it come to our division.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, sir, what the difference between the key fob and the card? The card's going to be able to hold more information?
So the card will include, if I may, so here's a picture of my ID. So that will be your access point. My ID will access our Raptor system. It will give me entry into the building, and each person, based on their level within the division, that will determine their access and what hours, what buildings, that type of thing.
Okay, so with that, you could give every student and everyone who worked there, let's say, a number.
In theory, yes.
And so they enter, and so you have the fact that they're there because they've signed in with the card. And so then at some point, if we have interior points set up to go to one place to another, say to the cafeteria or whatever, they would do that, and then they would be able to be monitored?
So this system does not have that capability. This is basically just an enter and exit type system. IT and myself would have access, like if you needed to know if a crime occurred in a building, and I could tell you if we could look and see if my ID was used during those hours to make entry into the building.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just a quick question.
Certainly.
When will we find out what other money we have in the different departments? Will we find out before February 20th? Because if we're deciding on, based on what you were saying, adding more money to the budget, I'd prefer to know how much money he has before I promise anything else.
Yeah, no, we really won't know that. What's happening, and I think what we had talked to Mr. Conlon about is, and Dr. Hummer can speak to this, if something comes up, we're going to find the money to help him do whatever it is he needs to do that rises to the top. And that's where we'll have to probably look at facilities or IT to help do that, or
I see.
any turnover savings that we've talked about before.
Sure.
So it's kind of hard to lock it in and say, we'll have this much, because he probably needs $1 million. But I also know that Mr. Goodwin is meeting with those departments, so I'm going to see if Mr. Goodwin wants to add anything to what's happening now as well.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I appreciate that. I would also say we do have these frequent meetings, and so one example would be we have a number of schools that have a portion of the door knob or access control that we'd like to have without the push button. So we can order a new core, and we can change some of those pieces with the help of our facility services department. So they may have money in their budget for cores already. So we can collaborate as two departments to save money on, rather than ordering that whole component.
Sure.
We can go ahead and access that through another budget, facilities, which would normally be in charge of providing, updated hardware for doors anyway. That's just one example. Another is IT, taking a look at cameras that go down rather than having to replace those through security and safety. It may be that that's available through IT. So there's a lot of collaborative experiences, but we're not talking about finding a lot of money.
I understand.
Yeah. We're talking about probably finding opportunities to save money more than anything else, but maybe not add to his budget.
That's good.
Thank you.
Savings good.
Yes, savings is good. That's important.
Thank you.
Questions?
Mr. Chair, so talking about sub pay, I know that was on there.
Thank you very much.
Just doing some quick math, and the only subject I'm good at is I was looking at sub pay over the typical 8-hour day. I'm looking at a degreed sub would be making $16.80 an hour, and a non-degreed would be $14.35. Does that sound about right?
Yes, because you are very good at math.
Well, I just wanted to see if you'd put pen to paper with me. But anyway, are we looking also at what competing areas are doing for sub pay?
We do, because we do compete. The problem is that Winchester City doesn't have to approve their budget as soon as you all do, so they can look and see what you're offering and then go higher.
You can cheat.
So it's kind of, we'd like to say we can lock them in, but they can come in later and raise that, as well as any other division can do it anytime during the year.
All right. So, and then, Mr. Chair, one more. We talk about CEP and kind of been kicking this around and having conversations with other board members as well. CEP, I think yesterday's presentation, I'm sorry I had to leave early for the other meeting, but I think you said we are having about $150,000 of debt service for that wasn't paid, for students still accessing lunches and still being able to eat. We're not turning students away or anything like that. It's hard for me to get on board, though, with $2.2 million versus carrying a debt service of only $150,000. It's hard to say to the taxpayers that everybody's being fed, but we still want $2.2 million when we can still feed our kids and only carry a debt service of $150,000. Am I missing something?
So, Mr. Chair, if Mrs. Curry, if you can come up, because we did address this question yesterday. Appreciate that question, but yeah, Mrs. Curry, if you can dive into that, and I can help fill in details too.
So with the $150,000 debt, we're not telling all children, all families, you can eat. Those are students who are going through the line, who don't have money on their accounts, and still choosing to eat. If they come through the line, we cannot turn them away. They do have to get a reimbursable meal, which on the slide yesterday, I'm sorry, I don't think you were here for that, it had the components which they would need to select for that to be a reimbursable meal. So that's the difference. When we look at that 2.2, we're looking at all 21 schools and saying you have the opportunity to eat. Again, we know that not all 14,000 students are going to take advantage of that, probably about 60%. Unfortunately, with the reimbursable rate, it doesn't cover all of the expenses.
But, I mean, we're at a public meeting here, and we're telling students publicly right now, Winchester Stars here, that we're not turning kids away. All kids can come in and eat. They will have a meal. They will not go hungry. So it's hard for me to get on board with $2.2 million versus $150,000 of debt service.
So,
I mean, that money can be allocated toward giving our teachers raises, our teachers bonuses, going for safety and security, putting out new buses. It's just a huge chunk when we're not letting anybody go hungry. We're still feeding everybody.
it won't be 150,000 if that is the case. We would incur more debt. Again, that is something that is on VDOE. It's also on USDA. It's not something that I think as a district that we have like put out there that students know if they go through the line, we're not going to turn them away. So do I know if it's going to go to 2.2 million now that, you know, we're discussing this, and maybe some family members weren't aware of that?
Mr. Chair, if I may. And I'm struggling as well to wrap my mind around this. And the 2.2 million, it is my understanding that is a cost for this year, and then potentially that will be the cost for next year, and then that could go up should we have more participation in this program. Is that correct?
It could. It also, another factor is if we have more families who are eligible for that ISP. So if we have more families who are receiving SNAP benefits that are eligible through Medicaid, then as we looked at the multiplier yesterday, that 1.6, if the ISP goes up, then that calculation changes and we may get more reimbursable at the free rate.
So speaking to the ISP, just to make sure that we have a full understanding, and Ms. Camry, I'm referencing the slide deck from last night as well. I'm not sure if there's a way that we can put that up so that folks here that are viewing online or here in the gallery can see. But to that ISP, just so that everyone understands, it's based on the SNAP percentage, so the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And that program provides and empowers parents with grocery money to purchase groceries for their family. So those SNAP participants still have the ability to have a school lunch provided through the SNAP program should their parents choose to purchase those items. So that 1.6 multiplier, it takes the number of SNAP eligible families that have already been predetermined and screened by the government and multiplies it by 1.6, and hence our percentage for CEP. Is that do I have that did I state that? That's from the USDA's website. I also have that web reference if anyone would like it, happy to provide. So my concern with this, there's no cap. There's no cap that we can forecast. So this year it's 2.2 million. What could it be next year? And then what could it be the following year? And that's my concern. Now, I know in the big scope of things, let's step away outside of Frederick County. I do understand that the Senate Bill 263? 283. Senate Bill 283 did pass the Senate Appropriations Committee with a 15-0 vote. I understand that. I realize that's coming our way. But after having conversations with board members, I don't think we should depend on the state to make this decision for us. And I think this is something we need to make here in the county. My fear with this is that next year it'll be more, and next year it'll be more, and we'll still keep going back to the county asking for more, when in reality, our students are fed and provided for. If the parents are irresponsible and don't want to allocate their SNAP benefits to provide a lunch for their child, that stinks, and that's where we come in with our debt service. And that's where we provide that lunch. And 2.2 million divided by 150,000 is 14.67 years. And I know it'll go up, but we have other funds and other things that we can reference. I hate to lean on the vacancy and
Turnover savings.
thank you, vacancy and turnover savings, because I know that we lean on that quite a bit, but there are other areas where I think we can cover that debt service should it go up, and we can still provide for our students.
I concur with that. I think we need to lean on the debt service covering that rather than raising the rate up to over the 2 million.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for bringing up those points, Ms. Klein. I will say we're the richest country in the world. We are a county that is growing, and our local composite index is growing. And while we may not know if this fund is going to increase, it's almost, again, I've said absolute before, it's an absolute that it will increase because those numbers are increasing for us, inflation is increasing for us. But there is study after study about feeding children, and it's almost, you can't argue it. Crime rates go down, attendance rates improve, grades improve, and while that you, Ms. Klein, were referencing the SNAP, during the COVID era, SNAP benefits were very much improved. So families got SNAP benefits at a much higher rate, and that continued for, I want to say, a number of 2 years. Ms. Curry, you might be able to speak to that. And then they were cut off. And so these families that had become accustomed to receiving more SNAP benefits were all of a sudden left to feed their families on a much lower a month benefit. So while in theory, these families could possibly, use their SNAP benefits to provide lunches for their children however they choose, that's probably not the reality for these families. And the reality is children don't get to choose their families. Some are in better situations than other, and they don't get to choose the choices that their parents make. I've seen on another study that feeding children is $1. The investment that you receive back is you get, for every dollar you spend to feed children, is $2 back. And that is an investment that any investor would go crazy for, and $1 on a child is $1 well spent. $1 to feed someone their most basic need is $1 well spent. And I disagree completely with any argument against the CEP. I think that this is funds well spent and funds that our locality should definitely kick in. These are our children.
Mr. Chair, if I may. Just to confirm, unless there's something that I missed, it's my understanding SNAP benefits are still in place.
Correct, at
Okay.
a lower rate
Lower rate,
than
okay.
COVID era.
Okay. Also, Ms. Cameron, I think we do have yesterday's thank you. Referencing slide 30, I want to make sure I did the math correctly.
Got it.
Thank you.
30.
Thank you. It looks like there's only if we were to remain status quo today, or correction, if we increased from the status quo CEP of 9 schools and we went to the $2.2 million option for all 21 localities, there's only a 2% increase in breakfast consumption and then a 5% increase in lunch. And that 5% increase is 696 students. So the way I'm reading this is $2.2 million only equates to an increase of student lunches by 696, and I'm not sure about the breakfast because it doesn't appear clear there. Maybe I missed something in the graph. So we're only feeding an additional 696 students. And where I'm getting that from is the very bottom line, participation in lunch participation membership, 100% CEP, 8,407, and then business as usual, 711.
No, you are correct. But what I wanted to show you, Mrs. Klein, that I think that we talked about yesterday, and Mr. Atkins, you had left, is I want to draw your attention to the red line. If we do business as usual, the school nutrition fund will need $1 million regardless.
And that's already baked into the budget, is my understanding.
If it gets approved by you in this budget for FY '25.
Okay.
Once it's approved, it stays in the budget, just like the 2.2. If you approved it, we got funding for it, it stays in the budget for next
And
year
that
and the
becomes the
following year.
baseline.
Yes.
Okay.
So I want to talk about that 1 million because I think that's kind of important because it's not like business as usual means no more money into school nutrition. Why does it need that? Because our federal reimbursement does not cover all of our expenses. And in order to have a 3-month fund balance that's healthy for a fund to have in case emergency arise, we would need that $1 million.
Right, understand.
Okay. I
100%.
didn't know if they knew that piece since they weren't here yesterday. Sure. But what you're saying is correct.
Okay, so if we increase it, if we spend the 2.2 million, we're only increasing by 600 to feed 696 students. Okay, so,
Well, hold on. If I may, Mr. Chair, I want to be very clear on this, though. That's to increase 1.3 million, because the million is going to continue, and then to get up to 8,400 students, we'll need 1.3 more, 1.2 more.
1.2, okay.
Okay, I want to be very clear on that, because again, if we continue with the number of students, it's 1 million.
Right.
If we increase the full, all schools covered, it's the additional 1.2 to get to the 2.2 million.
Yes, understood.
Okay, just
Understood.
want to make sure we're clear on that.
So for 1.2 million, we get an extra 696.
There you go.
Thank you.
Yes,
Okay, okay, so make sure that's clear. Okay. I still am having, this is a crummy situation for families to be in, it really is. And this is where, if that family is in that situation, that child comes up for free and or comes up for a free breakfast or a free lunch, I'm really still having a hard time wrapping my head around why we cannot service that debt. And there's a program in Prince William County. I should have written it down. It's a nonprofit. It was founded by a local mom to cover the school debt, the school meal debt in Prince William County. It's a 501c3. So people where that is their passion, they can donate and they can cover that school lunch debt. I think if this was something that was known in this community, we've had such fantastic luck with Bright Futures. That is an amazing organization. I really think that we could cover this cost. I think this county is generous enough, and our tax code is such that it's a benefit to those that can donate. I really think we could wipe this out. But I can't, I'm having a hard time justifying the 2.2. Mr. Chair, I'm finished. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I? So, can you bring that slide up that had the 2.2 phased in, and thank you.
This one, sir? Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So we're looking at deciding whether or not to spend 1 million or 2.2 million on feeding X number of students. And we're assuming that the debt that's accrued at the school level for those meals that we have to essentially pay for out of our pocket because they don't have points on their card is going to equal 185,000, 150,000 or whatever. And are we also then assuming that that encompasses everyone who isn't eating on a day-to-day basis? So those kids that come up without any money on their card, does that cover all students that potentially are not eating on a day-to-day basis?
In reality, we are projecting 150,000 of bad debt by the end of this year.
Okay.
So anyone who does come up and doesn't have money
Right.
and charges.
But what I'm
yes.
saying is, for those students that come up, okay, that's great, but what about the students who don't come up? Is there any data on how many of those students there are that don't come up and don't eat?
Well, all we can say is that we project it to be about 60% who will participate in CEP. What we also know is that there are kids who pack their lunch some days and not others, and then there's some seniors who maybe leave to go to a job and don't eat lunch at the high school.
I see.
But then we don't really know how many don't participate at all without a reason.
Right.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, Mr. Bell, I don't know if this slide would help as well, that this shows lunch before CEP participation and then lunch once they were CEP. These are 9 schools that are CEP. If you see for Dal J and Redbud, see how there wasn't, or excuse me, Dal J and Stonewall, there's not much of a change there because previously Dal J and Stonewall were also CEP as well. So we went from,
And these percentages prior to CEP are the reduced and free lunch, is that right? Or how many are participating in that?
my understanding is this is participation, but I'll have Mrs. Curry second that or rebut that.
It's participation overall.
Thank you.
So,
So then, we're looking at 600 and some students divided by 1.2 million, is that right? Or 1.2 million divided by 600 and some, I'm civics, I hate math. Is that what I'm looking at?
on this one,
Sorry, I don't have my calculator.
Yes?
yes.
Roughly,
Yes.
yes. Yes, Mr.
Okay. And does that equal out of the amount that that kids pay for lunches? I mean, where did the 2.2 come from, I guess? Because this is a little bit different than the way it was presented before, or at least in my mind. I guess, no, like I said, I'm civics, I'm not math, so I guess I didn't figure this out. Thank you for putting it in a way that I could understand it.
If I may, Mr. Chair, and then Mrs. Camry can chime in, we wanted to break this down even further for you all so we can have these conversations and questions. I want to draw your attention to each of these columns here. At the bottom is the total amount we need in order to operate and feed the students based on the percentages that Mrs. Curry and her staff are able to determine feeding their
Right.
kids, right? So if you look at that first column, business as usual, the majority of those dollars, a little more than half, is from federal reimbursement.
Okay.
Okay, then the second phased in, which is these 5 schools that we are recommending with 35% as that floor, if we were to do a phased in approach, we would increase the amount of federal meal reimbursement. If we went to all of our schools as being CEP, not feeding all 14,000, but all schools, we're looking at 5.8 million. So that number increases, but that's not what we need to be able to fully operate. We need the number at the bottom there.
I understand.
Yep.
So then, how much of that 1.2 is spent on upgrading our kitchens to accommodate a full CEP, everybody eats?
That is on, right there, the capital out, yep, that one. If you
All
look at capital outlay there, you'll see 100% CEP, you'll see 491,600.
And then services, supplies, and bad debt is 429, 468, so you're looking at 900,000, that's almost $1 million. So then you're really looking at about 200, 300,000 to pay for the food. Is that right?
Well, the food line is up there for the 4 million versus 3.8 or 3.7, depending on if we go phase into CEP or do business as usual.
But I'm looking at that 1 million that we're gonna have to spend anyway.
Got it?
And then if you add the 1.2 million, that's what we would get for the full CEP, correct?
Yes.
So,
There was another slide.
no, stay there, please. Go back.
Yeah.
There. So out of that 1.2 million, and maybe I'm wrong, and this is why I'm bringing it up. Out of that 1.2 million, we're going to be spending 900,000 on services, supplies, bad debt, and the capital outlay for equipment and carts. Is that correct?
Yes, plus I think it's 3.6 positions as well.
Okay. So then you're
You'll see
looking
that in
at,
salaries.
what, $300,000 to pay for 600 lunches? 600 and some odd lunches.
Do the math. Yeah, sorry.
Yes, 696. So
So that number seems a lot more palatable to me than the way it was laid out before. I mean, essentially, whether or not the state decides to pass the Senate bill, if they do pass the Senate bill, is included in that bill, and I haven't read it, or I have read it, but I don't remember if it is or not, and maybe you don't either. Is that capital outlay, the services, supplies, and bad debt included, or are we going to have to incur those costs to be able to accommodate if that bill gets passed?
This is just assuming we're 100% CEP. There could be something in that bill that gets changed, so in reality, this should be pretty close unless they raise what the federal reimbursement amount is.
Right.
Right. So I'm not sure.
So what I'm saying is, let's say we don't fund, we just business as usual. Kids are hungry. We're going to still have to buy the equipment, carts, services, supplies, and bad debt if the bill passes. Is that correct? And that'll be out of our pocket because they're only covering the food.
It's possible, yes.
Okay.
For the carts, but under 100% CEP, those one-time purchase of carts is to kind of help
Right.
serve our kids.
And that's a
yes.
one-time, and to use your terminology, that's a sunk cost. Right? Okay. So then I guess what we're dickering around with then is $300,000 to pay for 680 some students. Would that be a more accurate way to display it?
You could
So-
say it that way. I mean, there's different ways to look at it, I guess,
So
yes.
that's a heck of a lot more palatable to me, and it could be more palatable to our constituencies as well if they see that breakdown. Now, Mr. Miles had suggested that people can look at this and go on our website. That ain't reality. They're not looking at it, they're not reading it, they're only gonna complain when they start seeing their taxes go up. And they're gonna wonder why their taxes go up. But that's life. So, to me, considering we have an 8% poverty level of student-aged kids in our county versus 13 or 14 in the state, this was 2017. I don't know if I have an updated number, but it was 8%. I'm sure it's higher now in the county. To me, this is a no-brainer to fully fund it for $300,000. Now, I realize that's not what we're asking for, because we have to pay for the equipment, we have to pay for the additional staff. But if this gets passed in the Senate, which, given the House and the Senate are both Democrats, heavy, it most likely will. It just depends on when. I'm just curious as to why we're waiting. I don't know. I hope that if our board here decides to not fully fund it, because basically, let's call a spade, there's only 2 of us up here that want it, then I hope that we can at least phase it in with the 5-school proposal that I think you had shown before.
Okay.
Can you see that? Can you bring that up?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So this is the proposal.
Yeah, these
that
are the
these were
schools. The 5 schools would be
Correct.
Bass Hoover, Jordan Springs, Orchard View, Robert Ayler, and Millbrook, and they've been identified as those schools that need it the most. Is that correct?
Yes, we looked at the ones that have at least 35% or above, and those are the ones that fit that floor. So yes.
So I'm a teacher, you know this, I say this all the time, and I know what I see in the classroom. I know what I saw in the classroom in Ayler last year with the students who I knew weren't getting enough to eat, who weren't getting the things they needed at home because their parents are irresponsible. But it's not the kids' responsibility to make up that responsibility, if that makes sense. I think it belongs to the educators or to the people in the community. We say we don't want to be like Loudon and Fairfax. Well, let's not be. Let's take care of our kids. Let's not just have nameless, faceless people here. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. People on the board are probably happy.
No.
So I digress. But what it's a plea really, just to look at this as carefully as we can. And, we're going to have starving children, starving people, regardless of what we decide up here, whether we fully fund it or not. So no one should ever say that we're not trying to take care of our kids, because that's what we're here for. All of us, every single person up here has these kids' best interest in mind. It's just a matter of figuring out how we can do it without costing the county a whole lot of money. But in this instance, I think it's worth, the juice is worth the squeeze. Thank you. I'm sorry, I was on a ramble.
Mr. Chair. So I did a little bit of math again. So it took the 2.2, divided it out by the 696 students. That's $3,160 per student for the year. Putting on a 365-day calendar, which we don't even do 365, but just do 365 here. That's $8.50 a day for that student. We're not counting weekends, we're not counting summertime, we're not counting holidays. So that goes up quite significantly, and I understand that part of that's to pay for equipment and everything else. But if this is a needs-based budget, we're asking the county pretty much for $250 million, and we're coming at them and asking for a new high school. If this is a needs-based budget and we're not letting students go hungry, why are we doing it? How can we keep asking the county for something that man, this looks great. It's a good, feel-good story, but people are impacted by the economy. People have been impacted by, once again, COVID and losing jobs, and hopefully they're getting them back now. But as the cost of eggs, grocery stores around the county, around the country, prices are going up. Everybody's feeling that. So instead of taxing people more on their dollar to feed 696 students that won't go hungry in our schools, because we have debt service that they can lean on and still get a meal, I don't see it as a need, because no child is going hungry. They're not going to go hungry. They have the opportunity. If they're shy, They're still might be shy to go up. I know a lot of folks, I went through a phase where I didn't eat a whole lot when I was freshman year of high school. But then senior year of high school, couldn't keep me away from the trough. So this, to me, is not a need. We are not letting kids go hungry. We are letting them have the opportunity to go through the line, get a nutritious meal, and go about their day. Well, now we have talked a little bit about the importance of food and how it increases test scores, but I believe that right over here at James Wood Middle, we have the highest SOLs, and we also have it might be one of the top schools for getting. It's the lowest for SOLs, and so I've gotten some different information then.
Yeah, so have I.
Yeah, well, the conversation that we had was in regards to another middle school that is the lowest, and comparing it to this, they are higher than that other middle school.
Okay.
So that was the conversation that we have. Apologize for any miscommunication there, or misunderstanding. That is what the facts are. Yes.
Okay. So, once again, though, we're coming at the county for a $250 million budget just for operations, right? Our day-to-day funding, day-to-day operations of the schools, safety, security, getting buses back and forth, education, keeping and retaining teachers, attracting new teachers. But we're not letting kids go hungry, but now this 2.2 shows up. I don't see the need for it.
Point of order. It's 1.2.
I have all schools functioning at CEP at 2.2 million.
Right, but if we do nothing, we're going to still give them $1 million.
It's part of the operational budget.
Right.
And this is the operational budget.
I
so
understand. Shouldn't
it's
it be divided?
2.2.
But shouldn't it be divided by $1 million?
And I don't think that'd be a point of order.
Well, sorry, I don't know what I'm
But
talking about.
you're good. Learning curve.
Mr. Chairman, we've been talking about food. I would like to really get focused on the budget and the necessary things, and we should focus on the teaching aspect. I got a little hungry talking about the food budget, but I feel that there are more important things that we should be discussing. We are investing in rebuilding the schools. There's talk of replacing boilers, AVAC systems. I was wondering if it had been looked at thoroughly to see if we could possibly rebuild the equipment that's in the schools, replacing blowers, replacing motors. The capital asset plan is in charge of that. We need to really look at the particulars. We have so much equipment that I don't understand why it's gotten to the point where we have to totally replace boilers. Boilers are the basis for a building, and there's so many components to a boiler that can be updated to increase its efficiency. We also have a number of school buses that are sitting in the lot. We have approximately 53 spare buses. They're using them for parts, but that's an equity that we could sell those buses and use the money to purchase new buses. There was talk about preschool indoctrination or teaching, and we have to teach the children to be potty trained. I think that that's the parents' job, just like feeding the children. That's the parents' job. We seem to have been carrying that over to the high schools, to where the teachers are doing a great job, and to entice the teachers, we need to have the money to increase the salaries. But if we're going to be sidetracked by spending money on food, which really is the responsibility of the parents, I think that we can utilize that money to help pay increases for support personnel. You want to increase the teacher's salary by 6.6% and the supporting staff by 6.6%. But when you look at the increase, a teacher making $52,000 compared to a support personnel making $20,000, that 6.6% isn't what it makes it sound to be. I think there are other factors that we need to be considering and not just feeding the students. We have a discipline problem. Talk about controlling the children. A child in high school should be potty trained, but because a teacher doesn't have the capacity to discipline a student who raises his hand and wants to leave the class for 10, 15 minutes saying he's going to the bathroom, I feel that this is uncalled for. We need to be concentrating on the teaching aspect of reading, writing, and arithmetic. Feeding them is a good aspect, but there's so many other considerations that we should be looking into.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion, if I may. Am I allowed to do that?
So this is a work session, so
So
there's
no motion.
Yeah, there's no motion, but if we can get a consensus in regards to what items you would like for us to take into consideration so we can present that on Tuesday for February 20th meeting.
Perfect.
So we have an idea in regards to what you all will vote on then, and at that particular
That's what I
time.
want to do.
Correct. So that's essentially what would be the next steps with this.
So it sounds like we don't want to fully fund CEP. Are we at a consensus to partially fund CEP for these 5 additional schools? Are we at a consensus for that? Or do we want to just go business as usual?
Mr. Chair, if I may. Dr. Hummer, I know we mentioned during our one-on-one session that there is the potential for two budget proposals to come before the board on Tuesday.
Absolutely.
If there's consensus, I would like to see one budget proposal with what Mr. Bell recommended, a partial phase-in, if you will.
I'm not recommending that. I'm recommending the full funding, but I want a consensus because if we're going to, I'd rather get something than nothing. So I'd like to know how, honestly, all of you feel about partially funding it before we move forward. So then we can talk about reading, writing, and arithmetic and broken buses.
So to your point, I think if there were 2 proposals presented before the board for Tuesday, one without the CEP completely,
Business as usual.
and then, so business as usual, and then one with the phase-in. Any other thoughts?
So is that the consensus, that a phase-in is more palatable than fully funding? I mean, can I know?
Yeah, so, Mr. Chair,
Better.
I would entertain that. I would definitely look at that, because before, in conversations that I've had with other board members as well, and, I've even brought it up to Dr. Hummer, when this first came out, I was not on board for 100%, but I was like, this could be something that we could phase in. I mean, looking at it the way it is now, when our debt services covers it for 150 versus 2.2 million dollars, I mean, that's a lot of money that we could use for other programs. If we voted on it today, which we're not voting, I would vote for no. I would take it off the budget completely. But I would like to, continue conversations with other board members, staff, and, constituents, convince me otherwise. So I would entertain definitely having both options on the table as a phase-in and not at all.
Well, the phase-in is basically $300,000, right?
So it's it's how, I think it's, if I may, Mr. Chair. Yes, ma'am. I think it's all how you phrase it. And I see where you're getting that from, Mr. Bell, but when it comes to the line item on the budget, For the phase-in, it will be 1.3 million total because it includes the 9 schools.
Right.
So as I am also in the consensus with Mr. Adkins, I am right now today also, I would vote no if this was still in, simply because my fear is that this will be an ongoing, continual ask. There is no cap to it, and that is something that's beyond all of our controls. Because the more students that take advantage of it, the more the ask is going to go up. Because the last thing I want to do is set a baseline and then have students miss out. Because if we don't increase, if it becomes an increasing ask year over year because more students are participating, because everyone's finding out it's free, and we have students who may not even, who may be able to afford their parents may be able to afford their own breakfast and lunch, but if it's free and the tax money's going towards it, then the mentality of the parents could very easily, I could see, well, fine, then we're just gonna take it for free. So I do see it great drastically increasing, especially if we market it and let everyone know that this is available. That's my fear. So if we were to vote today, I would also be a no. But I am interested after this meeting in talking to every board member again to see if there would be an interest in phase-in. I want to make sure everyone is heard and all the views are heard. But where I stand is I would be a no tonight if we voted.
I agree with Vice Chair. I'd be a no if we were voting on it today, but the suggestion to have both, I think, would be beneficial.
Did a number of students who took advantage of the free lunch during the COVID years when we had the windfall increase?
Yeah, I believe there's a slide up there. I think it was 49% and it went up to 60. So 49% before COVID and then 60 when COVID was in.
And
There it is.
And our number is 58 that we're looking at for 2.2. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we're estimating close to 60 as well.
So I guess 2 budgets then.
And also to be clear, Mr. Chair, if I may, if I'm understanding you all correctly, and for what it's worth, thank you, Mrs. Klein, for saying that, because I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to share that what they would like to see in and out of this budget, is we would provide those renditions of the budget. My initial proposal was for the full CEP. We'll propose the partial and not CEP included. We'll have that presented to you all on Tuesday, and then we will go ahead and vote from there. If there's any other items that you all would like to see into the budget, we would like to hear and entertain that. I overheard the safety and security budget there. If there's some additional dollars that you all would like to see in there, that we can either talk that through now or we can add that on. I think that's something that will be easy to do. It's when we're recalculating things, which is going to make things complicated. So I'm sorry, just really quick. So if there's additional calculations we want to do for any sort of reductions or adds, I would just ask, please, to let us know ahead of time, because the Tuesday meeting, we're not going to be able to provide that to you all. But if it's hey, add 50,000 here, subtract 2.2 there, that's going to be a little bit easier for us to do and be able to provide for you all.
Okay. Mr. Chair, if I may, if we could, in the one budget, if it's the consensus, I did hear loud and clear the need for more security, more of a security budget. So could we, in the iteration of the budget with the phase-in of the CEP, could we include the difference in that? So we're looking at 1.3 versus 2.2. 900,000. Could we, let's put that to security.
So
Would that be?
It would be the same amount, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
So
No, go ahead.
It would be the same amount that we're asking for from the same amount we're asking for from the Board of Supervisors, we're just putting it in different places.
That's a valid point. That is a valid point.
So,
And it is a fairly new line item on our budget, and it is a fairly new, we're still looking around in IT and other entities. Thank you, Mr. Bell, you're right. Could we look at maybe, let me dial that back quite a bit. Let's go for another 100,000 into safety and security?
Sure.
On the budget proposal.
Sure.
With the ramped up CEP.
Sure.
And also, let's throw it in there for without the CEP. Guys, feel free to jump in here.
Mr. Chair, I agree with that. I think, looking at it either from $150,000, $200,000 budget for safety and security, especially as we are kind of bringing our schools up to date, and, you know, can't teach them if they're not safe, right? So I would look at doing that. I would also like to see, I don't know how many folks got to go out and to the FCPS 101 and see the transportation department. Fantastic job you're doing out there. But we've got buses that are from 1996. I know you guys do a fantastic job out there, but do they even make parts for those anymore? I mean, if I'm gonna be honest with you, I've got a 97 Ranger, and I can put historical tags on it right now. Can we put historical tags and get tax breaks on the buses?
Maybe.
I mean,
don't know.
we can't get. It'd probably be difficult to get parts for those.
Yeah.
If we could phase those out and, you know, bring our buses up to snuff, because that is the first and last thing that touches those students throughout the day, and the necessity and the need for those is unending. You know, how many you guys do? How many miles? I wrote it down the other day.
2.4 million
2.4
a year.
And that's what, 4 trips to the moon and back. So it's 8 trips total. So 4 trips to the moon and back a year.
Yeah, we do about 13,000 miles a day
Yeah.
on our buses. Yeah.
And we got them from 1996.
Yeah, we have 56 buses in our fleet that have over 200,000 miles on them right now.
Don't
Yeah.
tell the Tesla.
I think it's about 40% have over 15 years on them, which there is no state regulation in Virginia that says at this age or this mile, you have to retire the bus. But actually, Ms. Camry and I had a conversation. I had a conversation with the director in the state last week, and basically our analysis of it is exactly in line with what the state says, which is the best practices at 200 to 250,000 miles or at 15 years is when that bus should be retired. So as we're moving forward, we're trying to get on that retirement schedule. So we do have a lot that are over that age right now. I do want to correct a couple things. The spare buses are not used for parts. So we have about 50 spare buses that we have on the lot. I think 28 of them currently are assigned to a driver, and that's just because our buses have to undergo regular maintenance. They have repairs, things like that. So if I bring bus 100 in and I'm driving bus 100, it needs repairs. It needs its regular service. They have to be serviced every 5,000 miles. They have to be inspected every 5,000 miles. I need a bus to get my kids to school for at least a couple days. So that's what those 50 spare buses are for. We don't pull parts off of those. We have 26 buses on the lot right now that are deadline buses. We do pull parts off of those. But again, if we have a 30-year-old bus out there and we pull a part off of it, that's a 30-year-old part that we're putting on another bus.
Exactly.
So, but we do use those. We do have a plan to try to get rid of some of those and get what we can out of them. We don't get a lot. This is my first time going through the surplus process. We haven't done it yet, but we don't get a lot for that. So,
Yeah, and I mean, who wants to buy a bus from the 90s, right? Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is playing in there.
yeah.
So, I mean, I would like to see at least another bus added to that. If we got rid of the 2.2, I would like to see another bus in there.
Sorry, Mr. Rackett, Mr. Chair, how much is that roughly, just so we can get
We use 130.
Yeah.
130?
130.
Thank you. Just want to make sure I'm getting this down.
You know,
That's for a regular ed bus. A special education bus is gonna cost a little bit more. But,
Do we need those? Where are we with those types of buses?
we're pretty good. We actually just ordered, with the money we got from the state that was allocated, we did order 2 additional special education buses. So our fleet for that is pretty solid. I mean, it's like anything else. We could always use another one, but we're in pretty good shape, so.
and I appreciate that. You know, I'd like to see at least one more bus added on there. You know, that's more palatable, because this is something that affects every student out there. So yeah, I would like to see that added on to the budget. Being I would like it not to be with the 2.2, but well, I guess we're not doing that. We're looking at the phased in. I'd like to see it with the phased in. I'd like to see it without being phased in.
So just make sure I understood you
Yep.
correctly. You want it on both budgets?
I'd like to see it on both.
What I'm hearing. So what I'm hearing right now to confirm, and then of course, if anything else we need to add from other members, what I'm hearing is two budgets. One is business as usual, one for phase-in for the CEP, but both of them, you would like to see a additional 100,000 for the safety and security and an additional 130,000 for both scenarios. That's what I'm hearing, want to confirm.
That is what I would
Okay.
like to see.
Okay.
And I'd entertain any other.
Concur, yeah.
I've-
So in total, we'll have 6 new buses a year?
That would be
Nine.
nine. That would be nine.
Okay.
We're currently at 6, and we added 2 in the current budget with this one additional, so that would be 9.
All right. Any other comments?
Yeah, I think the buses are extremely important, and the fact that we have so many that are antiquated, we need to kind of keep up with that. And whoever said it, that's the first thing that they see, most of them, get on that bus and go to school, and then the last thing at night when they go home, and that's an important environment for them. And it also is a safety issue. And I also agree with upping the security pilot program to make sure that it gets the best advantages possible, is trying to prove his point. And I feel like when the students feel safer, and kids nowadays, I hate to see this kind of thing go on too, but unfortunately,
Thank you.
we are where we are. And I really think that the students will just take it right in stride.
Are there any other comments?
Just one really quick. So we're looking to increase safety and security and transportation and decrease feeding the children. Is that correct?
I think you're taking that out of context because the children are getting fed. I think we are focusing on safety and security, and I think we're focusing on transportation, and not reaching into the taxpayers' pockets for additional dollars where we are already feeding the children and giving them the opportunity to be fed for $150,000 rather than $2.2 million.
But we're not. Okay. I'll agree to disagree.
Further comments from the board? So we're all in consensus concerning the issue on the two proposals, correct? All right. We do have one announcement before we adjourn this evening. The next school board meeting will be held on February 20th, 2024, and will begin at 6 p.m. Is it 7 or is it?
So the closed session starts at 6.
Oh,
Official,
I-
yeah, open session starts at 7.
Going off the notes here. So that will be at 7 p.m. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Mr. Chairman, did we have any other board member comments? We're all finished.
I asked if anyone had a comment.
Okay.
Do you have comment?
I do. I can't support the rendition of the budget that will be removing the school nutrition at CEP at its full 2.2, in addition, adding into the safety and security. I think it's troubling that we're at a point in our county where the majority of our board is voting against a budget initiative that will address food insecurity, that will decrease absenteeism, that will improve educational outcomes, and instead choosing to put it towards safety and security. Granted that, we live in a situation where we have to address these things. I personally believe that we should wait until the state funding kicks in and use the state funding for safety and security. Our leaders at the state level and our representatives should be protecting our children and they should be protecting our educators. The reason why we can't find educators and we have a hard time filling these positions is because people are afraid to go into the classroom. And that is a reality that we live with across the nation. And it is heartbreaking that this county is at this point. And I urge the constituents of the county to reach out to your elected representatives on the school board, on our funding body, our representatives, our senators, and let's get this addressed, because I don't know how long our state and our county and our nation can support a population that children and educators and even healthcare workers are unsafe. This has to be said. And I'm disappointed. And I hope that you all will reconsider your perspectives and your stances on this.
I concur.
Mr. Chair, if I may. I just want to make it abundantly clear. There is not a single student that is turned down for a meal in this county, breakfast or lunch.
That's right.
Is that correct?
That is correct for the students we know about. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Just want to make that clear. So we are not saying no to feeding students. Students are fed in this county. We are saying yes to increase safety and security because of the known threats in our country, and God forbid that happens here. We are staying ahead of the curve. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Trying to formulate this. I understand the debate here, and when I first heard about the CEP, I had different views on it. But again, no child is going hungry. No child is refused a meal, and I understand that. But we also need to take into consideration, and I've talked to Dr. Hummer about this as well. When I have constituents that are questioning why are we paying for things when our test scores are down, our discipline is increasing, disciplinary problems, and it's like anything else. Why are we going to pay for something when we're not getting the results? And we have to take all of these things into consideration. I believe that the classified staff need the raises. I thoroughly believe that. I can't imagine how some of these people are making a living. I know my own self, when I started working for the county back in the good old days of 1988, I brought home $918 a month, and we got paid once a month on the sheriff's office, and there were 5 of us. I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to try and make bank for 4 kids to eat in a public school. I've been there, I've done it on not that much pay. I worked for this county and for 26 years, and 16 of those I didn't get a raise. So I know what it feels like. But we have to take into consideration all the things that our constituents want. So I thank everybody for their time and their input tonight, and I think when we meet again, we will have a better consensus. Any other comments? Going once?
So, just a point of order, we do have a motion already on the table to adjourn
We do. We do.
by Mr. Bell.
I go back to the motion that was properly noted and properly seconded. Is there any discussion
Was
on?
it seconded?
Yes,
Second.
Now it is.
it was properly seconded, but any discussion on that?
Just thank you, Dr. Hummer, for bringing all of this to us, and to your staff for bringing all of this information to us. It's a lot of work that you've put into this, clearly, and a lot of passion and care and concern that you've put into this. It's not an easy thing to do to see your baby picked apart. So I can certainly understand the cringeworthy moments that you'll have, but keep in mind, too, that, we are all looking to really do what's best for the students and teachers here in the county. While we may not all agree on how best to do that, we hope that we can come together and present a perfect budget to you, Dr. Hummer, to present to the Board of Supervisors.
Having said that discussion, all in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.